Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Sarah.
Great. Are we about ready to begin?
Yeah, I will go ahead and start off here. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much to the University of Minnesota for inviting us here today to present to you. Can I ask Julie, are you able to admit, do you see that button to admit people in from the waiting room? I have it on mine.
I just disabled the waiting room so people will come in automatically now.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. So yeah, thank you all for coming today. We're really excited to share this program with you, and we have a lot to cover. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jennifer Munter. I work at Montana State University, but I'm also a graduate student in the Family and Consumer Sciences program. A little bit of history. In '99, I got an associate's degree in early childhood education. And from there, I knew I wanted my own business. So I stopped at the associate's degree and I opened up a preschool and a daycare center. And I ran that till about 2015. And unfortunately, my neck just didn't hold out and I couldn't do the job anymore of lifting and pulling and pushing and taking care of those little ones. And so I returned to school and I came to Montana State University in 2015 to get my undergrad degree in community health. And it's there that I met Dr. Marcia Getting, who will be presenting here later on this hour. And she approached our class with this program idea to bring Alzheimer's awareness to children through storybooks. And so I immediately, raised my hand and volunteered to help with this project because I missed reading to children so much, but also because my father-in-law at the time had just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He has now passed away through COVID. And so we don't have him anymore, but it was just a topic that was near and dear to me. And it gave me a chance to get around children's books again. And with that being said, we want to provide you today with just an overview of Alzheimer's, dementia, and the related behaviors that are associated with it. I'm going to discuss the impact that Alzheimer's can have on a child as well as on their family. And then I'm going to introduce developmental bibliotherapy, which is using storybooks to help children through difficult issues and life transitions. And then Marcia's going to come in and identify ways to use this program that you can take the information and use the program to help your families and your communities. So before we get started here, I want to find out, let's see. Oh, there they are. I want to find out who's in the audience. So please answer what title best describes you, and you may click on more than one of these. So I'm going to launch that question. So if you want to choose the one that best describes you, so I know who's in the audience today. All right, so we have now we have more extension educators. And I don't think you guys can see this, can you? It's just me that can see the results.
You'll be able to share the results after you end the poll.
Okay. It's looking as if there's 29. I have a few more. I have 21 responses. That's about all. I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. So how does that come up? I'm not sure what you guys can see right now. We have.
I see that the most we have are family caregivers, and we've got Minnesota extension educators at 14% and the family caregivers at 19%. So we've got a nice grouping there, Jennifer, of people that are interested in your topic.
Yes.
And if you scroll down, you can see there are 29% of concerned relatives and 29% who claimed other.
Okay.
Ah.
Wonderful. All right. So yeah, I'm not sure how you guys are seeing this, if it's different than me, but so we have concerned relatives, educators, family caregivers, and former and professional caregivers. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for hopping on today. Let's see. Sometimes you click, there we go. So the overall goal of this program is, there. Okay. So what we're aiming to do is to show you how you can use these storybooks in a way that not only teaches children about Alzheimer's, but also helps them cope with the changes that they're going to be experiencing and the changes that their family is going to be experiencing, because we hope that that's going to foster those relationships with the person that has Alzheimer's dementia. So why do we think a program like this is important? Because of the sandwich generation. So the definition of the sandwich generation is just a caregiver who is caring for an aging adult while at the same time caring for their dependent child. So I'm going to go to another polling question here. Question number 2. Would you consider yourself part of the sandwich generation? So given that definition that you see on the slide, and then the second question that you do also see is, do you know someone? So if you're not part of the sandwich generation, or even if you are, the second question is, do you know someone who is part of the sandwich generation? So we have 16, 18, 19. So
and I remind people, don't forget to hit the submit button. I was sitting here thinking mine was already there and it wasn't.
It wasn't. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share results. So 64% of you say that you are yourself part of the sandwich generation, and 92% of you know somebody who is part of the sandwich generation. So this topic is timely for sure. Okay. For some reason, sometimes I hit it and it doesn't want to advance. So I want to give you a few statistics from the Alzheimer's Association. So in the United States, currently, there are 53 million caregivers. And out of that number, about half are caring for someone with Alzheimer's or another dementia type disease. And then another fourth of those, so 25% of those, are part of the sandwich generation. So children are experiencing grandparents, relatives, maybe even neighbors, they are experiencing Alzheimer's in their life more and more. So this is our polling question number 4. So I'll launch that. Do you or someone you know take care of someone who has Alzheimer's? So this question is specific to Alzheimer's. Are you caring for someone, or do you know someone who is caring for an aging adult with Alzheimer's and a child? Got 20 of our responses in, 22. All right, I'm going to end it. We have 24 answers, and the results show that it's about half and half. So 46 said yes, and 54% said no. Okay. All right, so let's just jump right into our first objective. of today, which is to give you an overview of Alzheimer's and dementia. So dementia is just this umbrella term for changes in memory, in movement, comprehension, communication, and recognition that interferes with just daily living. And Alzheimer's is at the top here because it makes up 60 to 80% of all dementia type diseases, followed by vascular, Lewy body, frontotemporal, and other ones that includes Huntington's, and then also Parkinson's is down here with other. And then of course, mixed dementia as well. So what is happening inside the brain? This picture is from the Alzheimer's Organization website, and it just shows the amyloid protein plaques that are forming on your neuron. So we all know we have, billions of these in our brain that are firing signals back and forth and all around our bodies. And when someone has Alzheimer's, those plaques form, and it gets in the way of those signals, and it disrupts those signals that try to get through. And eventually the cell dies, and there's these huge tangles that you see of these plaques. And so here are, yeah.
We have a question. What about other forms of dementia, especially frontotemporal dementia? Will this translate to this material?
Yeah, so anything that really gets in the way and causes cognitive decline is going to be covered. A lot of the storybooks will just have dementia and just, so that covers all of it. And some will be specific to Alzheimer's disease. So it just kind of depends on which storybook you find. But yes, it can relate to all of the different types of dementia. And is that all the questions? I don't want to continue.
Yes, yep.
Okay, I hope that answered. So this slide shows on the left just a normal brain and the activity that's going on inside. So a lot of signals, a lot of firing back and forth. And then on the right is a picture of someone with Alzheimer's disease, and you can see the signals are diminishing. So those plaques are getting in the way. And here's another visual of a normal brain and a brain of someone who has Alzheimer's. Okay, so what are the risk factors? If you have a family member who has had Alzheimer's or who currently has, then that puts you at a higher risk. So the more family history you have of it, the higher risk you have. And then also there's a genetic, component here. And there's two different types of genes, deterministic and risk. And that, that's pretty self-explanatory. If you have the risk gene, it just puts you in additional risk for developing Alzheimer's. And then there's the deterministic gene, which is the Alzheimer's gene. And then women, African-American, and Hispanic population groups are also at higher risk for developing Alzheimer's. The number one risk factor is age. However, I do want to point out that Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. So just because we're getting older doesn't mean we're going to have Alzheimer's disease. And that's an important part to point out to children. So studies have shown that there are some protective factors out there. Exercise and nutrition have been shown to slow cognitive decline, which of course is going to lower that risk. All right, I believe this might be no, we have one more. So this is our second to last polling question. So I'll go ahead and launch it. Okay. So how many stages of Alzheimer's are there? Okay, we have 24, which is about what we're at. So 40% are saying that there are 4 stages, and 40% are saying there are 3 stages, and then 20% say that there are 6. So I'll stop sharing here. Okay, so I want to point out the answer is number 1, so 4. There are 4 stages of Alzheimer's, and this was not known to me when I first started. And so let's go through the first stage that I missed and didn't realize was the asymptomatic stage. And so those amyloid plaques are starting to develop on our neurons 20 years prior to someone ever showing symptoms or cognitive decline. So there's the asymptomatic stage. And then we go into the stages that most of us are familiar with. So early, or sometimes called mild stage. And that's when that short-term memory is first affected. And this is the stage where early detection is so important, because the person diagnosed with Alzheimer's still can make decisions about their future care, and they still have some say. So early detection is very important. And then you move into the middle to moderate stage, where there's disturbances in several of the daily activities. And then late, or the severe stage, that's when you're going to see most all daily activities are profoundly impacted, and a lot of care is needed. So there are 4 conditions that contribute to the symptoms that are associated with dementia. So the first one is amnesia, of course, the loss of memory. So the behaviors that you see with that are repeated questions, misplacing objects, and just not being able to remember what had been said and things like that. And then the next one is apraxia, and that is just the loss of movement. This is when they can't pick up utensils, have a hard time doing some of those daily activities. Aphasia is the third one, and that's just the loss of the ability to communicate and comprehend. So following directions is going to be a little bit harder, and just, overall engaging in conversation is going to be impacted. And then agnosia is just the loss of recognition. So this is when you're going to have the behaviors of them not being able to recognize you, maybe not recognize their home or just certain objects. And then I want to also just briefly talk about the 5 C's when you're relating to someone with dementia. And so the first one is just to be calm, consistent, be compassionate, provide care and comfort to that person. And so I want to read one of the stories that Marcia and I first used to develop this program. And we actually, when this program started, I developed a whole bunch of reading guides to about, I don't know, I want to say maybe 6 or 7 of these books. And this was one of our first ones. And so I wanted to read this to you today. And as you're listening, think about the 5 A's, I guess, but really focus on the impact that the behaviors are having on Noah. Noah's the little boy that you see there. And then also really focus on which of those 5 C's that you are, that you're seeing. So, and I think I will just begin. You might have a hard time seeing this, but. So this is called What a Beautiful Morning, and it was written by Arthur A. Levine. Summer days at Grandpa's house began with a booming song. One with big round notes about a beautiful morning, because that's how it felt to Grandpa and Noah. They were already up to notice. Grandma? She didn't quite see it that way. So Grandpa and Noah brought her a cup of steaming coffee, which helped. Then they took off down the road with the dog, singing raincoat and galoshes and umbrella songs. Boats and beaches and sailors come home songs, bright breaking dawn through the clouds songs, singing as long as the walk would last. They even sang while Grandma made them cinnamon French toast, which sometimes led to slightly burnt toast, but nobody ever minded. Then they talked about their day. What's on the docket, Grandpa would ask, and Noah always had dozens of docket ideas. But this year, Grandpa forgot to ask what was on the docket almost every day. One morning, he couldn't remember how to cut his cinnamon French toast. Your fork is here, Grandpa, Noah said. Then once, when Noah accidentally woke him up from a nap, Grandpa looked scared and said, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Noah banged out the screen door and stood in the middle of the lawn, breathing hard, a painful lump in his throat. Grandma came outside after him and kneeled down so she could look in his eyes. She touched Noah's cheek, sighed, and said, "Grandpa knows you. He just gets confused, that's all. So we have to appreciate what he still has and not focus on what he's lost." Noah thought that was like trying to feel good about the toys you still had when your favorite one got left behind at the beach. So Noah went ahead with his own docket. He walked the dog, he fed the birds, he vroomed his trucks up and over the spreading swamp maple. And he sat at the piano practicing Do-a-deer. He sang the line about starting at the very beginning, but then he played from the middle, which he thought was an even better place to start. Then suddenly there was Grandpa singing about a ray of golden sun, and he sang the rest of the song too, at the top of his lungs. "Not bad, eh?" said Grandpa when they finished. "Not bad, Grandpa," said Noah. At lunch, when Grandpa seemed lost, Noah sang Grandpa's favorite tuna sandwich song. And sure enough, Grandpa's eyes got brighter and he joined right in. Oh, please, no celery for me." Noah couldn't keep it up all day, though. He was used to Grandpa starting the songs. But Grandpa took a long nap, and Grandma and Noah came up with a docket of their own. They picked blueberries, they got cream from the market, they collected recycled treasures from the dump to paint when they got home. And later, as they made meatballs together, Grandma said, "Hey, isn't there a Snoopy song about supper time?" Noah sang it bright and loud. Grandpa looked surprised at first, but then he smiled just like he used to. It was like the sun breaking through the clouds. The next morning, Grandma got up and made coffee for Grandpa. "What's on the docket?" she asked Noah. "Maybe a walk with Grandpa?" Noah said softly. He wasn't too sure. But Grandma laid out Grandpa's walking clothes and made sure Noah had a sweatshirt too. "Go ahead, sing, Bubby," she said to Noah, as he and Grandpa headed out the door, hand in hand. And they took off down the road together, planning to go for as long as the song would last. So I guess what I'll have you guys do here is, if you want to put in the chat kind of what you noticed. So as you were thinking about the impact that that Noah, some of the things that Noah experienced, some of the things that his grandpa and his grandma experienced. And then when you kind of thought about those 5 C's, does anybody want to put anything in the chat that kind of stood out? Music helped. Okay, I see that. Yeah, music helped the memories come back. I see grandma stayed calm. Yep. Yeah, she really took over that role for Noah. Yep. Continued with the same traditions of the past. So they still came up with the docket. They still sang songs. And then they went on that walk together. Noah wanted to continue spending time with his grandpa. And they gave Noah age-appropriate explanations. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. And yep, grandma helped Noah learn for sure. She got down at his level, at his eye level, and explained. And I liked where she said, you know, we focus on what he still has, and then how they really made that relatable to a kid. Yeah, interested in how Noah supports grandpa in continuing to get that physical activity. Yep. Yes. I think we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you guys all for commenting. It's just a really, really wonderful book. So on to our third objective for the day, which was to introduce developmental bibliotherapy. So bibliotherapy is just using storybooks. And there's clinical bibliotherapy, and then there's developmental bibliotherapy. And so we're using that developmental because parents, educators, and—
This isn't what I thought it would be. Okay.
Oh, and somebody's not muted.
Oh, no.
So it's using storybooks to support that social, emotional, and cognitive well-being and development of a child. And parents and educators use it. The clinical bibliotherapy approach is used more for like clinical psychologists and things like that. So we chose developmental bibliotherapy to highlight. And the way it works is it helps children learn about and relate to just relevant issues or problems that they're experiencing. It enables children to recognize, understand, and express and manage their feelings that are associated with what they are experiencing. It allows children to observe, learn, and emulate pro-social skills and behaviors through modeling. And then it can really help children identify problems and then solutions to those problems. As an early childhood educator, I read a lot of books, you know, when I had someone who was gonna have a baby brother, you know, we read a lot of those books and just really related to what they were going through at the moment. So that it really can help a child through difficult situations. There are specific guidelines to conducting a bibliotherapy session. So first step is to identify your issue, which for us, it's also having a grandparent with Alzheimer's. Step 2 is choosing the right book and at the right time. And step 3 is implementing it. So developing a plan and reading with a goal in mind. So we don't want to just grab a book off the shelf and start reading it right away. We want to know, what are we trying to get across, and what's the goal of reading this story. And then we want to follow up with some discussions and activities so that the main ideas are really come across to the child. So when you choose a book, you got to think of some things and ask yourself some questions. So when it pertains to the interest level, you can ask yourself, is the child going to understand the concepts? Are they going to understand the vocabulary? Is it age appropriate enough for them to take an interest and make connections? You also want to think of the characters. Do they change throughout the story? Are they presented positively and without discriminatory language and stereotypes? So are the characters realistic, and can they relate? the context of the story, you can ask yourself, is my child's current situation, so what they're going through at the time, is it similar enough to what the story is, the setting of the story, the age of the characters, and the problem that the characters are going through? Is it similar enough to what your child is experiencing? And then you should also look at the illustrations and just see if they're relatable to the child, if they're engaging and colorful, and then if they just represent the characters in a respectful way. And then another thing to look at when choosing a book is the message, the overall message. Does it encourage the child to reflect and engage in discussion? Does it show the characters and empathize with their feelings and actions? Does it provide hope and also, problem solving? Does it solve the problem and provide coping strategies for the child? And then specific to choosing a storybook that depicts Alzheimer's, you should look and find ones that label and define Alzheimer's. Also, does it help children understand the behaviors that are associated with having Alzheimer's dementia? Does it show positive coping? Does it support relationships? And does it differentiate between Alzheimer's and that normal aging? Does it differentiate between normal aging and Alzheimer's? Sorry. Does it preserve the unique history and personality of the person? And then does it offer a way to help children continue relationships with their loved ones? So that brings me to my final poll question for the day, which is, when you think about the story that you just heard, which one of these were not present in that story? Oh, I got to launch it. Sorry, forgot. So which of these were not present in the story that was read to you? Okay, I have about 20 results here. It looks like that's all that's coming in. So 90% of you said A. So I did not label and define Alzheimer's, and that is correct, it did not. And then the next one's 55% said differentiating between Alzheimer's and that normal aging. And that's correct also. It did not clearly do that. And I'm going to talk about how you can get around that here in a few minutes. So the next thing I want to do is highlight, oh, I'm sorry. I've got to talk about non-human characters. So there are storybooks out there that represent like cartoon characters, and these are also wonderful to use, but studies do show that children relate more to human characters, especially when you're dealing with difficult topics and issues that are pretty heavy, that are affecting a child's social and emotional development. So, and then also, so the Remember Balloons, this book uses metaphor, uses a metaphor, and it's the balloons signify their memories. And so of course, Grandpa has the most balloons because he has lived longer and has the most memories. And then their parents have a little bit less, and then the little boy and his little brother have even fewer balloons. And it's a very endearing story and one of my favorites. But something to remember, our metaphors can sometimes be really difficult for children to understand. So you want to make sure that it's age appropriate and that you explain what the metaphor is. Because, with these stories, their message, their images, and their metaphors are going to shape how kids think about ideas and the behaviors of someone with Alzheimer's disease. So it's gonna shape that for the next generation. So that brings me to kind of a strategy where you don't have to put a book back on the shelf because it didn't bring up Alzheimer's dementia or it didn't really distinguish between Alzheimer's and normal aging. What you can do is find the few books that do a really good job and have all of those components. So one of them is Please Explain Alzheimer's to Me. And it has a parent handbook with it as well. And we have several of these copies that we can send out. And that book does a really good job. So it's a good one to start with. And then Striped Shirts and Flowered Pants, that one also defines Alzheimer's and really hits on all of the points from the previous slides. And then read those to your child and make sure that they really have an understanding of Alzheimer's dementia and really have a good grasp. And then you can fill in books like The Remember Balloons that uses metaphors, or Ferguson the Forgetful Frog that has that cartoon character. And then also What a Beautiful Morning, because by this time, if you read it, the fourth book, they're going to know that you're talking about Alzheimer's dementia, and the book doesn't have to bring it up because they've already gotten the content from the first two. So reading the order of the books that you read is important. So, and then now I'm going to move into the implementation part of conducting a bibliotherapy session. And I wanted to emphasize and focus on recommended reading practices. So sticking to a schedule will help the child know what is expected and allow them to view reading as an enjoyable part of each day. And number 2 is read books to yourself first. And this allows you to familiarize yourself with the book's length, the content, and the appropriateness. So you'll be able to pick out, okay, well, this book didn't mention Alzheimer's, so I like it, and I'm not going to put it back on the shelf, but I'm going to find that book that really explains, and I'm going to read that one first. So always read the book first. And then number 3, allows you to have an enjoyable reading time for you and your child. So when you provide that ideal reading environment, everybody is comfortable and you're going to have less distractions. And number 4, looking at the illustrations and talking about the book, that just supports the child's curiosity and interest in the story. And it allows you also to bring the author and the illustrator to life. So a lot of times I would sit down with my group of kids and we wouldn't even read the story the first time. We would just look at the pictures and I'd ask them questions and they'd predict what would happen. And we would talk about the author. And so there's so much to a storybook that you can engage the child with. And as you read, keep the child involved. This is going to allow the child to build mental pictures of what they just heard. They're going to be able to express their thoughts and ask questions. And it's going to allow you to point out important parts of the story. And then number 6, so always answering the question that the child asks, either during the story or if they ask the question after the story. It's just going to support deeper learning and allow the child to better understand the main concepts of the book. If you're not able to answer their question right away, because you might not know, it's okay to say that and just make sure that you do follow up with them and find the answer. It's normal for children to have a tough time sitting still. So provide the child the opportunity to experience the book in various ways. A lot of times it's hard for them to keep their hands to themselves and busy. And so if they had crayon and marker, they could be doodling while they're listening or something like that. Can kind of help. Also, you can find opportunities to, stand up and move around in some way that aligns with the story. That will also allow them to experience the book in a variety of ways and just keep their attention. Number 8 is read the story multiple times. So children typically enjoy reading stories over and over again. This is a good thing. It's a normal part of a child's development. So I think a thing to really ask yourself is, what does my child understand about this story that they may not have understood the first or second time? So they're always getting something from it. And it increases their understanding of the story, and it really helps build those reading and language skills as well. And then number 9 is setting aside a time for discussion after the story. And of course, this is also just going to build on their comprehension and understanding of the story's main points. Some of the questions you can, ask is, what was your favorite part of the story? What happened in the story? Asking them what the story is about and having them recall. And then the 10th recommended reading practice is bringing a third dimension to the story. And what I mean by that is, if the characters in the story are planting flowers, then a good follow-up activity would be to plant a flower together, and you can talk about the story while you're doing that. Or if the characters are eating pancakes or making French toast, like in our story, then the next morning, make French toast and bring up the story and have a discussion. Okay, so I didn't bring this book along with me, but I was able to take out the part in the story that I wanted to bring to your guys' attention, which is also another reason why it's recommended that you always read the book first. So about halfway through this story, the little boy says, "Something's wrong with Grandpa. He can't hold on to his balloons anymore. Mom looks at me with sad eyes and says, that happens sometimes when people grow old." So as we talked about earlier, we want to be able to differentiate between normal aging and Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. And so right here, that kind of goes against that. And so I want to point out, again, you don't have to put the book back on the shelf. This is actually one of my favorite stories that I've come across. What you would do here, and what you would know to do by reading the story to yourself first, is that you can omit that sentence. You could modify it and say, that sometimes happens when people have Alzheimer's disease. And again, going back to the order of how the books are read, if you're reading this number 3 after reading a couple other books that clearly explain Alzheimer's, then that's also going to help. So you don't have to read a book verbatim. I remember I would come across these books that I really liked, but sometimes they were too long for my group. And so what I would do is just shorten that page up. I would never skip a page, because the kids always, they would always say, "Miss Jenny, why did you skip that page?" So I don't recommend skipping over an entire page, because they will notice that. And plus, you'll miss the opportunity of the illustrations. But you can, for sure, modify, shorten, and adjust, what is said. Oftentimes we would just look at the picture and talk about it. So there are ways around it. So just really recommend reading that story first. And then I want to point out really quick, and I got to check my time here, but another reason why this program is important is there is a hidden population of caregivers out there today, and they're called young carers. And there's estimated to be about 250,000 of these young caregivers who are ages 8 to 18, who are providing caregiving services to a family member, either a parent or grandparent with Alzheimer's dementia. And so usually this is like early onset dementia. And yeah, we aren't gonna have time, but I'll go ahead and post this link in the chat. So you can watch this video. It's called "My Name is Lisa," and it kind of gives you an idea about what that population is going through. And then the Alzheimer's Association will post this link as well. They have a 4-part video series that helps just provides additional information for kids and teens. And then they have these additional resources as well. So we will post both of those links in the chat box, but I'm going to turn it over to Marcia.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jennifer. As you can see, there's real opportunities in using storybooks for telling people about Alzheimer's. And one of the things that we did at our training that we had for Montana Extension agents was to talk about ideas on how you could take this information further. So one of those is to establish a little library. And or if you walk around your community, not today, I hear the weather's bad in Minnesota as well as Montana, but you'll find that there are free libraries, and you could contact the owner and ask if you could add one of the Alzheimer's storybooks to their little library they have. And of course, another idea is to not only build it, but what else could you do? And Jennifer, okay, you could create an Alzheimer's storybook bag. And this is what we've had several individuals do for the local library. Someone had commented that their library does have these resources. And in Montana, we've been very fortunate. We've had a Montana Geriatric Center that has given awards out to local libraries to buy various storybooks that talk about Alzheimer's. So this is something that you could do as an individual, and then maybe get some other people interested as well. Jennifer, you want to change or okay? Yeah, newspaper articles. We also had developed some newspaper articles. You know, Jennifer talked to you about developmental bibliotherapy, which was a new word to me. And I go, this is so cool to learn about something like this. And maybe some newspaper articles on that would be possible. So this is something that we have at our website with Montana Extension. And there's a series there. And maybe you could be the one that would convince a local editor to run that in the newspaper. Then some of you may be aware, particularly your extension agents, family and consumer science, that there are family and consumer science groups in the high schools and junior high. And these students have community service that they do, and their group is called the FCCLA. They can make storybook bags maybe as a part of their classroom project, and they themselves could go ahead and add something to the local library or the little free library. We also know that some schools have school newsletters, and maybe those articles could be printed in there. In Montana, we have parent e-newsletters, and the articles are short enough that they could be included in one of those. And even some places have portal announcements, and that could be an area that an article could be placed in. And I was doing a guest lecture the other day, and when I asked this group of students, how many of you know someone that have memory loss or Alzheimer's? And I was actually shocked because out of that class of 24, 22 hands went up. And that's the biggest group that I found. So there's ideas, and it's exciting to get some of these things out to the communities that didn't even know that storybooks were available out there. Quite frankly, I didn't until I became a member of the Montana Alzheimer's work group. And the Minnesota also has had a work group looking at ways that they can help with Alzheimer concerns out across the state and the counties. Then we have our 4-H groups. And our 4-H groups do community projects. And before COVID, we had this great idea. We were going to have the older kids read to the younger kids. And now we're going back to that again. But even with a community service, those that are enrolled in clothing projects, they sew, well, they could make some storybook bags perhaps. And the people could, the 4-Hers could go ahead and make those storybooks available at the library, as well as the little free library. And then there's always fundraising, you know, teachers get involved with that, but you can fundraise to buy books for these various sources. And what you'll find is there's people in the community that perhaps have had somebody, a loved one pass away from Alzheimer's. So the idea is maybe they would be willing to donate some money, and you could put a label in the book. You know, this is thanks to the XYZ Bank, thanks to the Department of Public Health and Human Services, and our local AARP Montana has also provided some funding so that we could purchase books to make available at our local libraries. The facilities out there are really endless. We can think about some of the child care centers that Jennifer was talking about. We've already mentioned libraries, but I also think the elderly care facilities are possibilities, because sometimes mom and dad bring the children to see grandma or grandpa or another loved one, and the kids don't know what's going on. And maybe you could bring a teenager along who would read the books that are at the nursing home, for example, to the kids. We also have the senior centers across the states that provide food, but they also have their own libraries. This could be a possibility. How about 4-H youth camps? You know, they learn a lot of different things, but so many of them are now being impacted by what's going on in their families. And one of these storybooks, see, the idea is the adult or the teenager learns something when they're reading the books to the children. And I think that's a really cool concept. Then one of the things we want to encourage you to think about is coming together and maybe offering a community storybook training session. That would allow you to partner with some other organizations and get a team. You know, on one person trying to do something, it's a lot of work. But if you get others involved with Extension, maybe the Family and Consumer Science group, there's other groups that I've seen that you have in Minnesota. So you can do that and first provide an overview of Alzheimer's dementia, very similar to what Jennifer did. And I've got to tell you that photo that she used was really great. Then you can talk a little bit about the developmental bibliotherapy. See, I have a challenge saying that whole word, but we have all of that information at our website. And one of the things about Extension is we're delighted to share our information with others. Certainly, we have taken advantage of the Minnesota Extension because they have absolutely great materials there as well. So we've got those reading guides that Jennifer has developed. Those are at the website. They're very excellent resources to help you know and improve how to read a book. I just thought you sit down and you read a book. Well, I watched Jennifer with this young person at a library in Belgrade, and I was just amazed. I thought that's the way you do it. And so she gives you some of those clues in the reading guides. They're really good. I recommend them. And then the storybooks. And what we provided are the storybooks that we ran across. And of course, at the time, I ended up ordering some that, quite frankly, I said I would not use this with a child. So we did not develop the reading guides for those. And since that time, there have been additional storybooks purchased. And we are fortunate that we've got a couple of grants. And so, when Jennifer has free time, she's going to be developing additional reading guides for those that we feel would be very useful. Using social media might be another way to absolutely publicize the program that you're planning. And we're finding that very effective. And I know Minnesota is doing things as well. I found additional resources that I think you might be interested in. For example, we provided these from the National Institute on Aging in the packet that we provided for Extension agents. And then the Alzheimer Association has buku numbers of different publications. And I focused on these three because I tend to get involved with estate planning, money manners, and some of those legal kinds of things. And then the Alzheimer Association has come out with what I think is an excellent magazine. If you're not on the mailing list for that and you know somebody with Alzheimer's, you will find it to be just super in providing background information. And it's so done so well that it's one that you would want to share with others. Like I've shared with other individuals in my community that I know have Alzheimer's. And then I encourage them to sign up for it because it's free. And then we've got the Alzheimer Foundation of America, and they have recently started a magazine article as well. And so there's resources out there. I know starting in 1980 was, or maybe 85, when the Alzheimer Association was formed. And at that time, when my mom had Alzheimer's, there wasn't as much information out there as there is now. And so not only are there the storybooks, but there's resources galore.
Thank you, Jennifer and Marcia, for the webinar. And we wanted everybody to know we have additional webinars being held January through April of 2023. And I put links in the chat for where you can find those webinars. And also we would like you to do the evaluation after this. I've also put that link in there. It's called zumn.edu later eval. I thank you all for attending, and thanks again, Jennifer and Marcia, for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Were there any questions? I'm trying to go through the chat really quick. I don't want to miss anything. I can always send information out, but was there any questions that anybody had before we leave? Somebody shared a resource.
Yes, Kathy.
Kathy, yeah. Yeah, so some books, I think a website that has a book on it, the way it looks. So thank you for sharing that, Kathy. Yeah.
Somebody asked if there were any books particularly good for young toddlers, so little ones.
Yeah, so there are, I would say, let me go back a few slides here. I'm going to actually stop sharing, and I'm going to try to find this here really quick, because there is one that has minimal text, beautiful, colorful illustrations. It's this one right here. Share my screen again. So this one right here, it's called When My Grammy Forgets, I Remember. And this one also has, something popped up on my screen. This one also has a phrase that's used on every page. So depending on how old the toddler is and what their language abilities are, this is a good story to, if the child can repeat that phrase, I think it was like 3 or 4 words, that's a really good way to get them engaged as well. So, but a lot of these stories, yeah, toddlers that young is kind of hard. I think you just have to know your child and what they're able to, to handle, what's age appropriate for them, because sometimes you can't even go off the age, right? It's just what's developmentally appropriate.
And I might throw out there that when we started, we picked out a couple of books, and then lo and behold, they became out of print. And so sometimes when you go to those secondary markets, you might be able to find one of those. And we've put that information up as well. If you can find this one, buy it because it's very good. But we will be looking at some more because they're really good ways to tell the story.
Thank you so much to our presenters from Montana. We're so excited to be able to partner with them to bring this great information. We will be sending a follow-up email with hopefully a PDF of the PowerPoint, if that's all right with Jennifer and Marcia, along with all of the links and the eval link and additional information. This webinar has been or is being recorded, and we will be posting that up on our University of Minnesota Extension Center for Family Development YouTube channel. We'll have a link in that follow-up email as well once we get closed captioning added to the recording. So please go back to the recording, share it with family members, colleagues as well. So thank you so much, Marcia and Jennifer, and thank you to everyone for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.